additional, what are you grateful for? If you want to put that in the chat, or I'm going to poll my people in the room. Margaret, what are you grateful for? Oh, Margaret is grateful for Livable Sunnyvale and Kat and the people. Thank you.
I am grateful that we're going to be putting on an art and wine festival in June 7th and 8th for the community of Sunnyvale.
Very nice. Let's see. I am grateful. I got to walk with a friend today, and she was telling me about an event that I will talk about later on in our announcements. Mike, what are you grateful for? He's trying to be grateful. That's what he's grateful for. Chuck?
True. I'm grateful for the Wisconsin Supreme Court election results.
Oh, yes. The Wisconsin Supreme Court results. Yes. And Agnes?
I will be grateful if I can get the Wordly link in the chat.
So, having just a slight technical difficulty with Wordly tonight, but momentarily, if you wish or need the language translation or want to try it out, Wordly, it's in the chat. If you click on that and you put in your language, you can go and see Wordly translates for the meeting. And this is from a grant from the County of Santa Clara that we got. We're also applying again this year for that grant. So let's see. And Doug is grateful for natural beauty around us and the many places nearby where we can enjoy it while hiking. Beautiful. Thank you. So just a couple announcements. Thank you, Sunnyvale Community Services, for hosting. We are in the usual room, and so it's good to be here. Um, we don't have any electeds right now, so we will keep going. Wordle is in the chat and throughout the meeting. If you, well, I can't really tell you if you join late, but we'll keep reposting that so that you can click on Wordly and see a translation. There's a lot going on in terms of announcements. There is a lot going on Saturday, so you may need to cut yourself into thirds. So Sunnyvale is hosting the Earth Day, and that is from 11 to 2, and that's the website for Earth Day. Then we have Hands Off Walk. So that is, I can put that in there. So that's a walk that starts in Mountain View. We'll go down El Camino. It'll go from San Antonio to Grant, and that's from 11 to 1. So there's, I can stick that link in the chat for you. Oops, that's the wrong. That's still the wrong one. But I can put that link in the chat. And then another announcement is Sunnyvale Community Services. Their auxiliary is sponsoring a craft and bake sale, and that's also on Saturday from 9:30 to 3:30 here. And all that money will go directly to Sunnyvale Community Services. Then Sunnyvale has several boards and commissions that are looking for commissioners. I believe the Library Commission is one. The Sustainability Commission is also looking for commissioners, and the Arts Commission is also looking for new commissioners. So if you go to that website, and I can also put that in the chat, I can tell you more about the boards and commissions. In terms of Livable Sunnyvale updates, so let's see. Yes, ma'am. I'll introduce her in just a second. So in terms of Livable Sunnyvale updates, on Saturday, May 3rd at Off the Rails, we are hosting a housing advocates and orgs, and it's just a meet and greet. So that will be Saturday, May 3rd at Off the Rails. That is from 2 to 5.
2 to 5.
2 to 5. And at Livable Sunnyvale, we are also, this is our election season. So at our next May meeting, we will have board elections. We have 3 board members who their term is up, but I believe all 3 have said yes, they want to continue. And we still have 3 open board seats. So if anyone is interested in a board seat, Paulina will be sending out an email that says who is eligible to vote and who is eligible to run for a board seat. So look for that. And then, as with election season, it is also grant application season. So we have applied again for the Wordley grant from the county. We also applied for a grant from Silicon Valley Community Foundation. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that one. And we may apply for the Rotary grant again this year. And we'll keep our fingers crossed if we do that. We have Councilwoman Linda Sell here. Thank you and welcome. And let's see, do we have any other announcements? Oh, I should introduce commissioners. So we have from the Arts Commission, Agnes Bythe and Kat Filley also. Mike Cerrone is here for the Planning Commission. And I need to stop my screen to see who I can. Oh, Paulina is from the Paulina Zapata is from the Human Relations Commission. Leah Melman is from the BPAC. And am I missing anyone else? I think that's all. So if you joined later and you would like the Wordly translation, you can see that in the chat, and you click on Wordly, and it'll take you to another app, and you just put in your language, and then you go from there. Do we have any other announcements? Our speaker, I told 6:45, so I have 4 minutes to talk about our gratefulness if you want. Chuck's looking at me. Do you have an announcement? Are there any other announcements? Anything from Zoom? Any other announcements that I'm missing? Oh, Linda Sell, what are you grateful? We start most of our meetings these days. Oh, I'm sorry. Vice Mayor Linda Sell, what are you grateful for? I'll pass you the mic.
Oh, I'm grateful for great organizations like Livable Sunnyvale. So I really enjoy reading your letters when they come to council because they're very thorough and they have, concrete actions on them. So appreciate Livable Sunnyvale and all the volunteerism and passion that it takes to run this type of organization. So thank you.
I'm going to tag Paulina or anybody from the chat. Anybody from Zoom want to say what they're grateful for? Colleen, Paulina, Leah? Oh. Yes, we announced Earth Day. Chuck was working on Wordly. So I can talk a little bit about board positions for anybody who may be interested. We typically have 1 board meeting a month. We we usually have 2, but we're trying to go down to 1. Our board meetings consist a lot of planning our next meeting. And it was mentioned, it's funny, if anybody out there is a project manager, we need a project manager for our board meetings, but because sometimes getting people's schedules and planning what you guys may be interested in, and that part is a little bit challenging. So that's a big part of our board meetings. We're constantly watching council and what is on their agenda and what is coming up and on their agenda. Of course, we've been following the housing element, but that is mostly done, but there are reviews for that. Coming up at our next meeting in May will be sustainability. So we have someone from city staff to talk about the climate action plan, climate action playbook, which will be next month. And also someone from Silicon Valley Clean Energy will speak to that. So part of what they will also speak to is later on this month, they will be presenting some of the key findings and some of the measurements that came out, what they're looking at. So we'll present those too. And that's May. And don't forget, we have our social May 3rd. And the host spotlighted your video for everyone. Okay. So that's part of what a board member does. We're always looking to recruit new members and publicize and market our meetings. Other things we do have some subcommittees for our boards. We have a housing subcommittee and the village center subcommittee. So some of those meetings also would be coming up for you if you are a board member. And I see Kathy Tran is here. Kathy, I'm not positive if you're ready. I will introduce you and welcome. Yep. Okay. So Kathy Tran is an experienced political specialist who works for IFPTE Local 21, and she will explain what that is. A public sector union representing over 11,000 workers throughout the Bay Area. Her interest in politics and advocacy stem from her desire to improve the lives of working people through collective action. She went to San Jose State, and she's worked previously for Assembly Member Evan Lowe. She is a delegate of the South Bay Labor Council, a delegate of the Alameda Labor Council, and a board member of Silicon Valley at Home Action Fund Board. And she lives in Berkeley with her husband and her dog. So welcome. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks for having me today, Angela. And I think, Paulina, we also met at the Silicon Valley at Home CLP program. So hi, everybody. Really excited to be here to talk a little bit about like labor unions, if that's something that is a familiar or unfamiliar topic to you all. And just a little bit about, like, we do represent a chapter in Sunnyvale. We represent about 500 workers there. And so I can talk a little bit about that too. But just always happy to have any type of opportunity to share about the work that we do, as well as just getting the opportunity to talk about the labor world. So I'm able to, would you like me to screen share? Is that?
We'll let you share your screen and then you can go from there. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, I think I just sent a request and I am able to share. Yay. Okay. See my screen. So just an overview of some of the things I want to be discussing in this presentation. What is organized labor? Where do public sector unions fit in the labor movement? What intersection do unions have with elected officials in politics? What are the types of unions? What types that elected officials work with? Why they're involved in politics? And what does housing policy have to do with labor? I know Livable Sunnyvale isn't just inclusive. It's not just housing. It's also talking about like transportation issues. And so I could talk a little bit about that, but just, the focus kind of in terms of specifically talking about housing was kind of the nexus of where I met Angela and Paulina. So just focusing a little bit on that scope, as well as just, ways for people to get involved and be plugged in. I don't know how many of you here on the call are actually familiar with like being part of a union or being a part of a union household. And so I'm just going into depth, like just some of the 101 basics, but a union is essentially a group of workers standing together and they're seeking to specifically change the working conditions in their workplace, whether it's for advocacy for better wages, pay, and benefits. And organized labor is a strategy where workers form unions. In the city of Sunnyvale in particular, there's actually 6 bargaining units, and some of those are employee associations, but only some of them are unions. And so, just for folks to know, like a union has been a deliberate attempt where people have gone through the process of getting recognized as a union, like formally through the National Labor Board. And so just wanted to educate folks on that piece. And then we talk about this a lot in terms of for unions, but collective bargaining is the process where unions bargain on behalf of the employees with their employer. Oh, cool. Thanks, Angela, for sharing in the chat. And so you can thank a union for some of these benefits that people are able to enjoy. I know on Labor Day, we share this graphic pretty often, but just for some of the things that we're able to win through the labor movement, weekends, FMLA, child labor laws, healthcare, OSHA. These are just some of the various things that we have been able to accomplish. And there are still things that we are still trying to fight for within the labor movement. In terms of the labor movement, there are lots of different types of unions. Specifically, I want to talk about the public sector and the private sector unions. My local IFPTE Local 21, we specifically represent public sector workers. The IFPTE stands for International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. And so the international actually represents engineers throughout various agencies that are both private sector and public sector. For example, we have people that work in the federal government in the defense, specifically like that the Department of Defense. But then for the private sector workers in IFPTE, they are placed in like different companies like Boeing or Lockheed Martin. Like that's where a majority of a lot of our international workers are made up of. But in terms of the scope of some of the other labor unions in the private sector, we can think of like electricians, janitors, farm workers, cooks, plumbers, nurses, auto workers, tenant unions. And for the public sector workers, firefighters, teachers, police officers, nurses, librarians, park workers, code inspectors. These are some of the classifications in the public sector that you might think of. And so I have a picture here of some teachers that were picketing or on strike. And so those are that's a public sector union that is represented. And so it's a really diverse group of people, and sometimes you represent different types of sectors. This here is a picture of some workers in the city of San Jose that went out on strike for equal pay. This is from AFSCME workers, MEF Local 101. And they were fighting for equal pay because librarians were making less money than other classifications. And so it's really monumental in the sense that sometimes when we think about labor, it feels like it's like in the past, but there is a lot of history that has actually happened here in California and specifically in San Jose and the Bay Area. Recently, it was Cesar Chavez Day, and one of the things about Cesar Chavez was, you know, he led the United Farm Workers, and he had a really big impact, right, in that, and working with some of the Delano grape workers, and they marched, and that was something that I don't know if a lot of people know the history about, but it is something that we really have to thank for. And I wanted to capture some of the things that have been happening in the past that, you know, it seems kind of um, not insane. It's just, you're like, why didn't we have this? But it was because people went, you know, out on strike to ask for better wages, for better pay, better working conditions, like everything that we have fought for, like it wasn't given to us. It was never like a guarantee. It was something that people had to put their job on the line to win. And so I think that is a really cool piece of history in San Jose that is really close and also far away. For my local, we almost went out on strike in 2023. This was a really big moment because the last time folks had gone on strike, there was about, I want to say, like 100 workers in a other bargaining unit in San Jose, but this would have, but outside of the equal pay strike that MEF members did 40 years ago. Like this was like one of the bigger actions where 1,000 of our workers were ready to go out on strike. But luckily there was a deal that was reached so that we didn't have to do that, but people were ready and willing to walk out of the job to make a statement about just some of the services that they were able to provide and to keep running. And so, you know, there's a lot of activity, and most recently, I think most people can think of the VTA strike that happened for over 3 weeks. You know, that really made a big impact on people's lives. It's a big hardship for not just the workers, but also the community. Most people don't want to go on strike. It's definitely a tool that's a last resort, but sometimes the membership they have to decide and take a vote on these things for the entire group to see what will happen and move in the bargaining process. And so just wanted to highlight and illustrate a couple of examples. Shifting on in terms of just like having relationships with some of the different labor unions, specifically in the city of Sunnyvale, it has like a city manager structure, but you know, regardless of the different city governance structures, the city administration always has a contact person that handles labor relations, and like governance in regardless of whether it's a city or like a water district or a school board, and that really requires interacting with public sector unions as well as private sector unions outside of just that government relations person. And so, you know, in terms of if you're somebody that interacts with a specific elected official who's interested in running for an elected office, most of the time you will end up interacting with a labor union. Same thing for staffers that work for elected officials. You will end up interacting with different labor unions, as well as just being a community advocate. Like when you're in a room or attending some of these different events, most of the time there should or generally will be some labor representation there. One of the generally, just because different labor unions represent such different scopes as well as interests, it's really recommended to build relationships with one person from each of these different unions to know what's happening on the ground and being able to check in. It's, you know, one person from the electrical union, will have a different perspective versus somebody from a teachers union versus somebody from like the VTA, right? Like it's all a lot of labor unions, but like they all have different ideas and on how to do things. But working together and working in coalition is always a really beneficial way to at least get their perspective. And whether you agree or disagree with people's positions, it's always good to be able to have some type of relationship to know where people stand on certain issues and what's important, just as a community partner. Some people know things about like the contract negotiations process or the collective bargaining process, but just a couple things for people to know. Essentially, like just in the example of VTA, for example, like elected officials and unions cannot direct deal with each other. So, for example, like the chair of VTA can't go and talk to ATU specifically to work out some type of deal. It's generally managed by the labor union and a a labor relations representative. And so sometimes like the VTA or like the city of Sunnyvale, for example, will have like a law firm that represents them. Sometimes it's just specifically their labor relations person that handles the negotiations. And so elected officials are looped into what is being presented as the package for how the negotiations are going, but they themselves are actually not present in the actual negotiation process. Any package that's moved by the union or moved by the agency, that's something that the board generally has to approve of before they move something, but the actual negotiation process is not done by the actual elected official. And so during closed session on the agenda for cities, for example, sometimes they'll discuss how negotiations are going and they'll have that specific time to discuss what's going on. But, they're not allowed to direct deal with unions or management. One thing that elected officials are able to do is take meetings with the unions during the negotiation process time and just listen to what's going on, but they cannot actually talk about anything that's going on that's being discussed with management, as well as they can't like they can't share confidential information. But just letting people know this is actually how the process works, like in the labor world and as well as like from the elected official side. This is just also an example of just the many different ways that different unions interact with elected officials, and like the different touch points and how different the scope is. City workers, for the most part, like my union, there's a couple of different unions that are public sector workers that would interact, and they would want to talk about things like staffing in the parks, for example. In the hospital systems, there are nurses, there are lots of different classifications in the hospitals. And so if there's like issues going on, like sometimes you'll see nurses out on strike, like that is a different touch point where an elected official is still able to interact with them, even though that hospital isn't even in their district. Or sometimes it's in their district, right? That's another touch point. Public safety, fire and the police officers, like that is a pretty big, they are essentially like city workers or whatnot, but sometimes depending on like what city you're in, sometimes they could be represented by just the county. And so I just put it as its own little separate box, but they might have different not agendas, but like issues that they're dealing with that's very different and separate from city workers. Trade unions, usually that I'm referring to trade unions as like building and construction folks. So like electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, and I think that's what they're called, pipe fitters and painters. Like there's all different types of different trade unions, carpenters. laborers, like they all have different interests because they don't specifically like have like city worker is esque people that they represent, but like they really care a lot about having project labor agreements. Um, uh, and that's something that they advocate for in working with an elected official. And you know, I've been talking about VTA as an example, but transit agencies are another touch point for an elected official to work in and deal with different labor unions. Essentially, like why are labor unions involved in politics? Why is anyone involved in anything for politics? It's we have an interest in advancing and protecting working class families. We care about negotiations for higher wages, benefits, and pay to set the standard for our workforce and our community to be able to have like livable wages for our workers. We want to protect public services against things like contracting out. Um, Now there's a lot in terms of the automation and AI space that public sector workers deal with, as well as other industries. But that's something that is of particular concern, like in this day and age for our workforce. I know, for example, the Teamsters, they had a bill that they were interested in trying to make sure that we are not having AI trucks being driven to carry stuff. Uh, that didn't go anywhere, but that's an example of some of the things that labor unions are interested in politics. And, you know, I think this image really, you know, illustrates why it's important to be involved politically. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so there's many hosts of reasons to be involved, but these are the main reasons for our engagement. And in terms of labor support, like in like whether you're doing a ballot measure campaign, whether you're supporting a candidate that encompasses the values of Livable Sunnyvale, like for the most part, just like anything, like labor isn't a monolith. There's a lot of different um, viewpoints that different labor unions may have. And so having broad support is important, and also having many different types of labor union support is very helpful to those specific types of campaigns. And, you know, different unions have different strengths. Some people endorse candidates and measures, and they're able to provide a lot of volunteers or donations. Other types of labor unions don't really do that type of support in that way. But for example, our San Jose firefighters, they do a lot of barbecues, and that's one of their ways that they help contribute to some of these different types of campaigns. And so building relationships with labor unions is a good way to help get support, as well as get support for different types of ballot measures and campaigns that you might be interested in. And also just like knowing what stance a certain labor unions might have, like on certain environmental policies, for example. You know, it sometimes certain groups are in opposition, certain groups are supportive. Some labor unions are more progressive, some labor unions are more conservative. It's again like a huge broad spectrum, but it is generally helpful to kind of know like and map out and have those types of relationships just to know where people stand. And then just in terms of, you know, tying this back to talking about housing and why this might be important or relevant. So city staff generally work, there's generally a housing department. There's people that work in housing that, you know, you might deal with in terms of things like the housing element, like, you know, city staff write things like that. We have code enforcement officers, planners, housing specialists, like development officers. For the most part, if they are not just an employee association, some of these people are generally union workers. For I always think of this like housing is a labor issue. Rent, for the most part, has outpaced wages, specifically here in the Silicon Valley area. And working families can't always afford rent to like in this really high cost area. And so it's something that I think that we should all care about in terms of it being an issue. There are lots of unions that support ballot measures to support affordable housing. Again, I think I can't speak for all of labor, but you know, for the most part, we're generally supportive of projects to support affordable housing. Um, Trade unions protect construction workers that and construction workers that aren't unionized. You know, like they often face things like wage theft or workplace safety on the job, just because sometimes if you're not unionized, like those are things that aren't on your contracts. And so, you know, we always try to push for ways to strengthen like prevention laws and those types of policies in terms of being in relation to housing. And then I mentioned this previously before, but project labor agreements, like that's something that a lot of elected officials, like they weigh in on. And project labor agreements are like deals that are constructed to basically agree that the people that you're hiring for a project to do construction will use union labor. And so, you know, the South Bay Labor Council, which is the umbrella organization of many of the labor unions here in the South Bay region, like many of the trade and construction unions, they are very interested in having project labor agreements that are implemented in many of the different cities, school boards, and et cetera. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of why this is an important issue in housing. I'm going to shift a little bit to talk specifically more locally about our Sunnyvale chapter, which we call this SEA, which stands for Sunnyvale Employees Association. Here, we represent about 500 people in our Sunnyvale chapter with about 200 classifications. Some of the work sites that we have like include like the library, the wastewater plant, city hall, the courtyard, community centers and parks. And so our workers generally are wearing like green, like a forest green shirt with like the Sunnyvale logo. That's generally like how you know that they're a city employee if they're out in the field as like the frontline staff. But you know, a lot of people are also at City Hall in various departments and floors. I think one thing that I wanted to know is actually for our membership, we actually only have about 26% of our membership as Sunnyvale residents. That's about like 100-ish people. A lot of our folks can't actually afford to live in Sunnyvale. Some people commute as far as Stockton or Hollister or Los Banos. Some people commute from the East Bay, and a lot of people live in San Jose. So that is closer, but as we know with the traffic, it could be quite far depending on which part of San Jose you live in. And I think earlier I mentioned in terms of the different types of unions versus employee associations, we have 6 bargaining units in the city. You may be familiar or hear about some of these. That includes units like PSOA, which is the Public Safety Union. There's also a managers association. So that one isn't a union, but they are an employee group. SEIU 521, they represent some of the temporary employees. But we are one of the larger represented groups, bargaining units in the city. And, you know, one of the things that we care about a lot in our bargaining unit specifically is that we really want to make sure that our city is properly staffed. You know, a lot of the services have actually been expanded, but the workforce has remained the same. There's a lot of people, well, I don't know if this is common knowledge, but many people in like public sector workplaces are retiring. And so there are a lot of people with institutional knowledge that have like these vacancies and they're leaving. And, we really don't want to experience like brain drain because government works very differently than, private sector places. Like you really need some folks that really have knowledge and wisdom to pass down to new people. And so when we are understaffed, that really harms our city workers' ability to be able to provide and deliver public services. I'll name an example of something maybe random, but you might know. Like a long time ago, we used to have like 20 people in our tree division where we do tree trimming services, but now we actually are only down to 7 with a couple of vacancies. And so those people are only really able to do emergencies, like when there's like storms and stuff like that, they're able to go out and like clean up those sections. But because there's so much workload, but there's only like a few of them, the backlog is quite long. And so, if you're wondering like, how come it takes so long to do this? It's because of understaffing. And that's just like one example of like a specific division I can think of the last time I checked in and talked to our specific workers. And so, we really, as a labor union, were able to really amplify and highlight the situation. And so that's something that's kind of different than just being in an employee association. We ran a pretty comprehensive press campaign, media campaign. And, this is kind of one of the examples of some of the things that we did in 2022 to highlight this problem as we were bargaining. And so we had like bus ads and like this was at like BTA shelters and whatnot to share our message and what was going on in the city. And then I just, just to wrap it up, there's a lot to do in terms of how to be involved and get to know more about labor. We have a really rich tradition of labor in California. There's lots of resources and books and different libraries and places where you can learn labor history. I live in Berkeley. We have like the UC Berkeley Labor Center, which is really cool, which is a way for folks to learn and check out different history specifically about labor. But there's that's something that I always think the more you learn about something, like it really changes how you view things in the future. But there's also just like lots of upcoming actions right now to really join to protect workers and labor unions. I think earlier I saw in the chat like the hands off rally. That's definitely something that we are a part of that is really important. And then also additionally, like something that I think I told Angela about, but labor is part of the coalition to try to protect Medicaid. If there are Medicaid cuts, that is devastating, not just for the community, like not just for like community members and whatnot, but that actually will it will just really damage our local economies. And so we really have a vested interest to make sure that people are able to have their health care and also make sure that our communities are going to be able to stay safe. It really impacts like the workers because we represent a lot of people that are part of the healthcare system. And so we really care about making sure Medicaid is protected. And just in terms of just learning about labor history and learning about opportunities, I just shared a couple of examples where you can get information. If you click on the AFL-CIO website, they have like a section where you can sign up for like their email updates and newsletters, and they do a pretty good job of generally updating you what's happening. If you like Facebook or you want to know specifically more from the California side, the California Labor Federation is a good source as well. So national, state, And then locally, the South Bay Labor Council will have more specific South Bay events and you know, trainings, opportunities where you can get involved and join. I know when the VTA workers were out on strike, they had a lot of opportunities and rallies where they had events. And then I also just, you know, always want to share what we're working on in our labor union. I have a link to, you know, we have like all these different things like X and Facebook and whatnot, but I personally think our Instagram's the best. So I put the link for the Instagram. But I think it's really important to stay updated on what's going on just because in this current administration, the president really has been executing what has been outlined in Project 2025. And in Project 2025, he really wants to end public sector unions, period. And so we're always vigilant and paying attention to what's going on in the news because there's just different things happening all the time with some of these executive actions. And so the latest news that we recently got was that the president signed an executive order that would end union bargaining rights for federal employees. And that's a huge concern to not just our union, but many, many different types of unions across the board for what's happening with these federal employees. Again, I think I shared earlier that we our international represents people that are federal employees in the Department of Defense, and so you know the international put out a statement, but you know there's different types of mobilization efforts to try to you know not just let this sort of stuff happen, but really make sure we're showing up and sharing what we're thinking. And so I know at least for San Francisco, this is an action that our local labor union is going to be participating. But I know that there's several different hands-off mobilizations that's happening all throughout the nation, and I think I don't know if there's one in San Jose, but I think there's a couple in like Palo Alto and like Redwood City and whatnot. Specifically on this federal bargaining rights action. And I can share the link like to Angela like in an email because I think I linked a bunch of different things, but this would be an action that is happening right away that you can do to connect to your representative. If you just fill out the form, I think this is Action Network. It should call your phone and then you should be able to patch through to make a call and just share about you know some of these ways that we're able to protect federal bargaining rights. So this is a pretty good action that's very timely. That is something that just recently happened. And then lastly, in terms of you know the coalition for us to do trying to reach people to protect Medicaid, like we're part of this labor coalition, or we're part of this coalition that includes labor to do some of these phone banks. They're trying to call into these different districts who are Republicans, and they want to call decline to state / no party preference like voters. Like you know, ideal in a perfect world, we would be able to unelect these people, but because it's not 2026 yet, the best thing that we can do right now is trying to call people and try to patch them through to talk to their congressperson about, you know, seeing if they can leave a message about not cutting Medicaid. And so these are some of the different phone banking opportunities if you're interested in joining to make some of these calls and just try to do something about these looming cuts in order for folks to give tax breaks to the wealthy. I feel like I talked for a very long time, so I'm glad I got to go through all of my pieces, but I again just want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about just my world and also just opportunities to stay engaged and get involved. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and see if anybody has any questions. And Angela, I hope I am doing okay on time. Thank you.
You're fine, Kathy. So there are two questions in the chat. Thank you very much. Do unions have a fund to help support workers who strike? And then another question is, do you need to have the legal right to work in the US to join a union?
So, different unions have different strategies in terms of funds to help support workers who strike, but generally, yes, if workers decide to take a strike vote to go out on strike, generally they set up a strike fund. Like I know when we did a strike vote, like that's something that we certainly did. We set it up as well as set up like a public like GoFundMe page for people to just donate. We didn't end up going on strike, so we gave everybody back the money to people who donated on the GoFundMe page that was public. But it depends is the short answer to that. But for the most part, if it's a really real strike threat, then yes, typically unions set up funds. Do you need to have a legal right to work in the US to join a union? I want to say no. It kind of depends, like, again, on like the different types of unions that are like available, but for them, I don't think so. Like, for example, um, we have at different universities and CSUs, like people, are there on different like work visas and whatnot, and you're able to join a union. It's not so much like, what your background or history is. It's more so like if you are if you join then to become a member, typically there are like union dues and stuff like that, but that shouldn't prohibit you from joining a union. Are there any more questions? Oh, and Angela, I saw your comment about calling the AFL-CIO for protecting the right to bargain for federal workers.
Are there any questions in the room? Chuck has one.
Yeah, I had a quick question. There's just something on one of the slides that caught my eye, and that was tenant unions. I don't know if there's anything you can say about that, or if there are any organizations in this area like that.
So typically, I haven't like I work with different tenant unions in Oakland in particular. Like I don't, I'm not in a tenant union, nor do I have a lot of exposure or experience specifically with tenant unions, but they are some of the groups that I have worked with a lot for like different types of community um items. Like so in Oakland, for example, like we're part of this coalition to do like a people's budget. Like so it's like a coalition of different folks from not housing groups, environmental groups, immigrant groups. And the tenant union is one of those groups that we work with, and they build out. And so all of these groups come together to build out like what the demands or wants that we want from a budget. And they've always been a really active and critical part of our coalition. But beyond that interface, I don't really have too much knowledge or experience of how the tenant union is structured. But they're certainly an important group.
Okay, hi Kathy. I had a question. Whenever we have in Sunnyvale, whenever we have probably most cities, when we have a big construction project in front of the Planning Commission, a number of people show up from the unions advocating for union labor at these projects. Can you, but at the same time, we want to build as much housing as possible, and because unions are paid a living wage and get some benefits, arguably they're more expensive. Can you maybe make the case for using union labor for these housing or other projects locally?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question and very topical, specifically to like ways that people engage with labor unions. I would generally say for working with labor unions, if you contract with non-union labor, I would say this is kind of a touchy subject, but some of our members are very unhappy with how City Hall is done. If you look very closely, there are things that are not totally like up to code or on par with how some of our standards should be. I don't know if that's a controversial thing to say, but if you use union labor, you'll make sure that that's something you don't have to redo. I can say at least for like electrical wiring or some of the different things, but I do know that's been an argument in terms of the high cost to do to not work with labor unions or a public labor agreement. But I would definitely make the case and the argument that like if you want it done right and you don't want to pay extra and you don't want a specific like different company to like possibly mistreat your workers and have wage theft and whatnot, like I would make the case for trying to do a project labor agreement, just so that yes, it's expensive, but like some of these things are taken care of, and that's something that is a value. Because like sometimes like if you contract out, like not everybody's a bad actor or like, but there are many instances where that project could get delayed for much longer and be more expensive, rather than just paying for a project like for union labor in the first place. That is expensive, but you're able to not have delays and stuff like that.
Thanks. I think you're saying you get what you pay for. So,
Hi, Kathy. This is Agnes. Do you know what the minimum wage is for union workers on construction sites?
I don't. I think it depends. Different unions have like they have different like structures. Like the best way for me to describe it is like for sheet metal workers, for example, like there's different like levels and associations. So like you'll start off as like an entry level person and or an apprentice, and then you become like a journeyman, or then you become like specific thing. And so they all have different like wages associated to when you get to that specific level. And depending on what type of union, those are also different. Like electricians, like for example, like some people who are in IBEW, it takes like 7 years or something for you to go from an apprentice to a certain jump, but then you make a certain type of wage. One thing that some people actually don't know is that construction workers like in IBEW, for example, who are in the private sector, they make way more money than somebody that is an IBEW worker in the public sector. But you do have electricians that are employed in the city. And one of the issues is that their pay scale and the wages that they get are not the same. So there's usually really high vacancy numbers for electricians in the cities because you're just getting paid way more in the private sector. So I don't have an answer in terms of what that specific number is, but I do know it is one of the things that makes a big impact in terms of like certain services. I don't know specifically what that's like in the city of Sunnyvale, but I can tell you in the city of San Jose, we have 63 full-time employee electricians, and there's like a 20% vacancy rate because the number is actually supposed to be 80. But the people who are getting paid in the private sector that are electricians make like, I don't know, like three times as much or something like that. And so they can't recruit people for the city, but there are people who choose to work for the city because it's a stable job versus the ebbs and flows of being in like the private sector. But I hope that gives some context into the different types of wages that somebody might get. And I wish I could give you just like an average, but it really just depends on what the rate is for these different types of construction wages.
The VTA strike, I think they stopped it. The court stopped it. So I'm not sure anybody got what they wanted yet. I think we have to wrap up for our next speaker. So Kathy, thank you very much for coming to speak. I'm glad you didn't have to commute down from Berkeley, or it's not a fun drive. And I will share your slides, and can I share your email if people have other questions or anything?
Yeah, definitely.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you all have a good night.
Okay, so Vice Mayor Linda Sell is here, and she wants to thank you for your work. So on behalf of Sunnyvale,
Aw, tell her I said hi and thanks.
okay. Thank you very much for your time and for enlightening us. Okay,
All right. Take care. Bye.
bye. So our next speaker tonight is the newly appointed CEO for the Sunnyvale Chamber of Commerce, Catherine Filley. She has a vision to build the chamber's strong foundation, championing, does that sound right?
Championing.
Is that me? No. Initiatives that support the chamber members, enhance economic opportunities, and strengthened our shared sense of community. She launched her career at Litigation Technologies, and she was a CEO and founder of her own business. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from the School of Art Institute of Chicago, and she is also a member of the Arts Commission. She is a graduate of both the Sunnyvale Leadership Program and the Sunnyvale DPS Citizens Academy. She's, I said the vice, but I did not say the vice chair of the Arts Commission. Yes. So thank you, Kat, and we look forward to hearing about the chamber.
Hello, everyone. I do have a presentation I would like to share. Okay. What does the Sunnyvale Chamber of Commerce do? So I think that a lot of us understand what the Chamber of Commerce does. So I'll go over it. But because the Sunnyvale Chamber has not had a leader for over a year and a half, some of you may be wondering, what direction is the chamber going? What are we doing? What are we working on? And have some questions. So while I have a slide presentation, I'm more than happy to have a conversation as well as we go through this. So I guess, Angela, if you see questions that are coming up, or if people would like to interject and ask questions as we go through, that would be great. I mean, nothing's better than an actual conversation. I think we all are a little, zoomed out. So the mission of the Sunnyvale Chamber of Commerce is, of course, to advocate and support the local businesses. Okay, so it's to advocate. My chairperson here is suggesting I hold the mic better. So. So supporting the interests of local businesses, fostering business opportunities and engagement. And the chamber really focuses on networking, education, advocacy, and collaboration. The Sunnyvale Chamber was actually established in 1946. And it was started to be a resource, a voice, connector for the business in the area. And that was the initial, when you look back into the paperwork of why it was started, this is the statement from the chamber. So the chamber is focusing on advocacy and policy. We do a lot of government relations for the businesses. We do things such as, well, we'll outreach to the business community and ask them what their needs are. We do this at mixers. We hold regular mixers. And those are not just mixers where like the real estate agents are standing there with the life insurance agents drinking wine and talking about what's going on in their personal lives. These are the mixers that we're having are functional mixers where we are introducing businesses together that are then collaborating. For instance, at one of our events, we were giving an award to New York Style Sausage Company, which is a company in Sunnyvale that I think they've been here for 75 years, something like that. And right, but it's a massive, well, let's go for a tour, Margaret. But when I first heard about them, I thought, you know, I know that somewhere. And I went and I looked in my refrigerator, and sure enough, my kids had like 3 packages of New York Style Sausage Company. And then on the side, it says made in Sunnyvale. It's pretty neat. So anyway, New York Style Sausage Company people were there. Whole Foods people were there. We introduced them because Whole Foods doesn't sell New York Style Sausage Company. And I mean, hopefully they're going to be selling it now. So that's just one instance of what can happen at a mixer organically that wouldn't happen normally in the outside world. But we also, people bring to us things that they would like highlighted for the government. And we bring together the government with the people in the chamber. So we're hosting quarterly breakfasts with the mayor. And then we would have mixers with the council people, the vice mayor, with the state, our state representatives, our county representatives, DPS, and economic development. So bringing the city hall to the business people is one of the things that we do, and let them have conversations with them. And then we also have a business and policy committee that works directly to highlight the business concerns that are being impacted by city, county, or state government policies that are coming through. So the chamber is, it is a member-to-member organization. So we are a 501c6, so not a C3, but we're still a nonprofit that focuses on member-to-member interaction. And the majority of those functions, we do a lot of work with our online communication, and but we also do a lot of in-person. So the mixers, the luncheons, and other events. And then, you know, building relationships. That's what the chamber is here. I would say that before I took this position, that I really thought long and hard about what value does a chamber have in this day and age, right? After the pandemic, we all got used to doing business on Zoom, phone calls. What's the value of meeting in person? But I would say that, especially in this environment and what's happening, it's more important than ever to have those personal relationships, because when you build those personal relationships, those are people that you can then rely on. You know, you have the face value, you know what, how you can depend on them, and that we're building a community. So I'm really focusing on building a strong community for businesses, small, medium, large, even the nonprofits. Agnes.
So, so Livable Sunnyvale has been a long time advocate for retail in our city. So would it then be appropriate for us to come to your mixers and partner with you as advocates for retail and also somehow retaining existing small businesses during construction projects?
I would say that that is a wonderful opportunity. And I would even go a step further and suggest that we have a relationship where maybe Livable Sunnyvale is an ambassador for the chamber, and you could speak to the concerns that these individuals are having and highlight them back for us. I was made aware, I think on Monday. It's hard to remember what day it is. When I spoke with Council Member Mellinger about some businesses. I don't know exactly where they are, but they're in northern Sunnyvale. Is that what
Yeah,
you're thinking
it's-
about, that are going to be displaced?
Yeah, one of the village centers on Duane is one that
Yes.
we've been speaking
And then
to a
Lakeville?
lot. Sorry?
I think there's another
Yes,
one on
in
Lakeville.
Lakewood, yeah.
Okay.
And maybe Chuck
Lakeview.
should speak to this because he's been our liaison, no?
Yeah, there's one up in Lakewood and one in Duane, not too far from here. Yeah, there are plans to kind of tear all of them down and replace them with townhouses.
Right. So I just learned about that on Monday, and I plan to go over there and provide them with information about the chamber, see if they'd like to join, and what can we do to help you. That's generally, hi, my name is Kat. I'm with the chamber. How can I help you? Yeah. And we'll get you business cards, Agnes. Um, and then because we have been without a leader, I think that the workshops, people who have been a chamber member would agree that the workshops and the training have been a little lacking. So that has been a massive focus of mine, to build up the value and the educational resources for the chamber members. And a lot of these things are already existing. For example, Treasurer Fiona Ma has an entire booklet that she's produced of uh, all sorts of things like grants for kitchen workers, like restaurant workers, that are available for FMLA and different things that I had never heard of before. So we are aggregating that on our website so that we can be a we can drive people to those programs and make it easier for them to access it. And then, member benefits like member-to-member discounts. That's also something that we are doing. I spoke with a dentist today who has his practice opening next Friday. He's very excited. He's going to have a ribbon cutting, and he wanted to make sure that everybody knew that if they needed a dental implant or some sort of dentistry that was done, that he would be willing to offer a member-to-member discount. And that's fantastic, but that's the type of program that I would like to continue to build. So the chamber, Agnes, you were talking about supporting retail, and I think that that's very important, is that we work to support local. I was told there are over 6,000 businesses on El Camino. I don't know the exact number, but I'm thinking, having driven up and down El Camino, they're probably close to that, just within Sunnyvale. Yeah, 6,000. And most of those businesses could use the help of a chamber to help elevate their presence, and to let the people beyond their direct customers know that they exist. The shopping, the concentrated shopping areas in Sunnyvale. I think with the downtown, sort of the change in downtown, it's perhaps harder for older residents to figure out where they should go and where they can do different shopping. I think that having a strong chamber with lots of members, and then you have the directory on there, and you could look up, where do you buy shoes? So that was a question that I fielded from a woman who said, I used to go to Macy's. I can't shop for shoes there now. Where can I go shopping for shoes and women's clothing? I mean, that's a good question. Well, she actually wanted to know if any of the businesses in downtown were going to open with those stores, and I told her that I did not think so, but that once I found out, I would let her know. And that's actually a great segue, because the Downtown Association versus the Chamber of Commerce. So what is the difference? The difference is that the Downtown Association is a membership organization that's just incorporates the businesses in the downtown area. So I believe that it's from McKinley down to the end of Murphy, and then Sunnyvale to Matilda. So that area, the city line and Old Murphy, is not, I don't really have members in that area. I have less than 5. So most of those members are part of the Downtown Association, and the Downtown Association members are taxed to provide the revenue for the Downtown Association. The Downtown Association's mission is to bring people to downtown through events and activities and advertising for the downtown area. So my opportunity is the rest of Sunnyvale. So I don't actually focus on the people who are downtown, because I mean, they have an organization that they rely upon. But we are separate organizations. Friendly, don't have any problem with them, but we don't really work together. So when I'm talking to, so right now I'm in fundraising mode, right, for the chamber. I need to bring in money to keep the chamber going, and I need to raise the visibility and make people aware that we're a vibrant community function coming back. And what do I say to them? I say that we are the heart of Silicon Valley. We're the second largest city in Santa Clara County. We are one of the big dogs. Like I run down the list of the corporations that are, here, and it's all of them. They're all the big players are here. But then we also have a vibrant small business community, all of those restaurants, all of that. We have a massive manufacturing area within Sunnyvale, where companies are actually creating, I don't know, widgets, whatever they're creating items. And that's really exciting. So I think that there's a lot more to Sunnyvale and the businesses in Sunnyvale than people first think about. But the job is to also talk with all of the companies and bridge the gaps between those companies. So one of the companies that I was speaking to the other day is Plug and Play. And Plug and Play is like the original WeWork, right? I didn't actually realize this, but the gentleman who started Plug and Play hosted Google, was one of his first companies. And when they got too large with 10 employees, they moved out. So, I mean, he really was there at the very beginning. So Plug and Play has been around for a long time. And if you go into Plug and Play for a tour, it's really impressive, because pretty much every technology and every company that has been through Silicon Valley has had a desk at Plug and Play at some point. And they're right here in Sunnyvale, and they're still running startups. And what they do is so innovative because they have startups, and they understand what the startup is doing, and then they go out to corporations who are trying to solve problems, and they'll bring in the corporation and say, here are 5 solutions for you. And then the corporations will work with those companies to augment the solutions and make it what they want or need, and bring them in, buy them, or whatever happens after that. But innovation is alive and well in Sunnyvale. So who can be a member? Well, Agnes can be a member. Everybody can be a member. There are individual memberships for home-based businesses. There are small, medium, large-based businesses. I would suggest, if you want to be a member, join now, because we're going to be raising prices. But you can get in now at the low rate. And then once you're a member, you can attend the chamber events. You can participate in committees. It's an excellent leadership path if you're interested in joining the board. And then our board has it's a wide opportunity, right? There are people all the way from the school district to small businesses up to the largest businesses. So if you are interested in that, that's something you can do. And if you're interested, if there's anybody who's interested in coming to one of our mixers, we have one coming up. I think it's on the 16th. It's on our website, but I believe it's April 15th or 16th. It's at Nova Works at the City Hall. And it should be an excellent, well, all of our mixers are excellent, but if you would like to come as my guest to that mixer and try it out and see if joining the Sunnyvale Chamber of Commerce makes sense for you, then I'd be more than happy to host you. So in conclusion, the chamber is a vital part of the business ecosystem, and being a member provides you with great opportunities, advocacy, networking opportunities, business opportunities. So join the chamber and ask me any questions that you might have. Here's my info.
On your website, so it's $120 to join if you're a home-based. Where's Livable Sunnyvale fit in that?
I think you guys would be small, so you would be $385.
Okay. When is the event again? The mixer?
Are you still on the website?
Yeah.
I think it's April 15th. So go to calendar. Yeah.
Oh, calendar.
Yeah.
Member center and then calendar. April 15th, yes.
No, that's breakfast. So breakfast with the mayor is on April 15th. That's open to members. And then April 16th is the Nova Works mixer, right? Yes, you are.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I saw you. I think so, yes.
April 15th and April 16th. So the 16th is the Nova Works. Yeah, the Nova Works. That's in there. 5 to 6:30. You got a whole social life to do.
Is the chamber going to sponsor what we have typically in the past called an art and wine festival this coming summer?
I'm so glad you mentioned that.
I bet you did, and you didn't even pay me to ask that question.
She's an ambassador.
Where's my business cards?
Yes. So the chamber is very proud to bring back the Art and Wine Festival this year. We are calling it the 49th and a half Art and Wine Festival because there should have been this should be the 50th year. But as I was just starting January 6th, there has not been a lot of time to plan a 50th Art and Wine Festival as it should be planned. So we have put together what we think will be really a fantastic event. We're working with one of the vendors that Cityline uses a lot. The footprint has changed a little bit because we're going to be going down McKinley from TAFE all the way to Sunnyvale, and then all the way down Murphy, and then the parking lots. So we won't be on Washington, and so it'll be half the size that it's been in the past, but there will be art, and there will be wine, and there will be festivities. And it should be a fantastic weekend, June 7th and 8th. I think it's going to run from 10 to 7 on Saturday, and then from 10 to 5 on Sunday. So if any of the Leadership Sunnyvale crew, who are now all ambassadors to the chamber, would like to volunteer, we are looking for people to assist us at our wine selling booth for a couple of shifts on those days. And if you can do that, then please send me an email or call me. My phone number, this phone number does not work for texting. It is just a voicemail or voice. It rings to my cell phone, but you can't text. Apologies.
So since I am the unofficial ambassador, if you want to send me some information, we can get that out to our members.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Kat, thanks for what you're doing. And I think in Sunnyvale, we're very aware of the value of the chamber. You mentioned the Art and Wine Festival. When the chamber went away, the Art and Wine Festival disappeared. The Pride events disappeared, and a number of other things. So it was really a kind of a very visible impact. But I wanted to ask about what we talked about earlier, the retail, and certainly North Sunnyvale, the retail's a big deal because there is at this point very little retail, but and when it goes away, it'll be a terrible impact to that community. But retail all over is struggling, and we had, I think maybe 2 years ago, we had a meeting about this, and we continue to look at ways to also support the retail, which is an amenity for the housing we want to build. And as you're working with the local businesses, if you can ask them, which we've been asking, and it's hard to get the answer, but what can be done to support retail? And I think that there may be some things that I feel like maybe some of our rules came about back when retail was very strong and we felt like, they needed to be constrained. Well, it's a different world now. And like we limit the size of signs, and there are maybe certain things that that we're doing to make it harder for retail to be successful here. So if the business community is aware of some way that city policy is uh, less than helpful in terms of retail being successful, because we all benefit if there's retail here in terms of vehicle miles traveled and amenities, and we want to be able to buy shoes in Sunnyvale somewhere, or shirts or whatever it is, and groceries, very much so. So if you, as you're dealing with the community, if you can get that feedback, then and let us know, then we can advocate for that. And I'm sure the council and the staff would also be interested in hearing that, because it might not be obvious to them where retail is being impacted. So
Livable Sunnyvale might have been involved. It was before my time at the chamber. But I do understand that the chamber was successful in advocating for the transfer tax that had to do with the property transfer tax that was affecting retail in strip malls in particular, where the previous owner would pass away, it would pass to the children, and then it was so expensive that they would sell it, and so all the strip malls were all those businesses were then evicted. And I believe that the chamber successfully petitioned city council to repeal that. Do you remember? Yeah.
I think what we did is that staff met with the chamber policy board, and the chamber policy board brought business people to talk to staff, and staff and the businesses communicated, and from that staff made a recommendation to I think staff encouraged not to do the transfer tax. So it was a good communications. Yeah. And that wouldn't have happened if it was actually your policy board that organized that meeting with staff. And I sat in on that meeting. I was lucky to be able to sit on that meeting. But it was just shows you how, like you said, when you communicate and talk to each other and understand each other, then it can better serve the community.
I actually had a quick question. Actually, the question was on kind of like how does the chamber come up to actually take an official policy on something like the transfer tax? So like the transfer tax is something that Livable Sunnyvale actually advocated for. We thought it was a very good way for the city to raise money for a lot of services that we can't provide right now. But the chamber came out against it for reasons that were very unclear. It doesn't seem to actually affect retail or other businesses that much. It's a very kind of marginal tax. And so I wanted to know a little bit about what is the process that the chamber follows to actually take a position on things like that?
So we talk to our members, and our members come to us, and we go to them and find out what's important to them. And it's I think that it would be a majority type of thing, listening to all of the different businesses and finding out what is best for the majority of businesses in Sunnyvale.
And then is that like, does the board take a position on that, or is there a voting mechanism, or like how does the organization take a position on something?
I don't know for sure, because that we haven't gone down that road yet. So, but I would think that there's an executive committee, and then there's the whole board. The board's not that large that they couldn't just have a conversation, and but we do meet once a month. But that's I can find out. But I do know that the Business and Policy Committee is very keyed into what the businesses that are in the Business and Policy Committee are looking for, and there's different levels depending on the size of the business, and so they keep a very close watch on what's on the city council agenda and how that will possibly affect their members, and then they reach out to the members and ask. And then also I had a lobbyist contact me from the bottling company about tethered soda caps, bottle caps. And so he wanted us to write a letter of support for this bill that was, or in opposition of this bill. And so we talked about it, and I sent over his information. We talked about it and decided that it wasn't something that we reached out to our members and asked them, how will this impact you? And it didn't really seem to be that anybody thought that it was going to impact them. And the question went to, supermarkets and to specialties. Like, how does it impact across the board to different things? And so we didn't we didn't end up taking a position. That's also partly because I'm, new and a little underwater and learning all the ropes. And so by the time that he asked me, there wasn't a lot of time left, but it's still an interesting process to reach out and talk to everybody about it.
I do recall, I believe, that for the SV Hopper, the transportation, that the chamber did send a letter of support for the SB Hopper. And I think they might have supported the library, our library measure efforts, but the library people might know. So I think sometimes the policy, the the chamber policy does come out in support of certain issues. I think at the time, the library and the transfer tax were going to, there was a competition between them. And I think the council didn't want the transfer tax to make the library, bring the library down. So the library was our push. So that's, in that case, the library took precedence.
So I have another question. There are times where there are areas that Livable Sunnyvale and other advocacy groups advocate for, that the state, in its infinite wisdom, has passed laws that preclude municipalities of doing what would be best for the municipality. So the question is, after that long intro, does the Sunnyvale Chamber partner with other chambers throughout the state to lobby for, let's say, retail as an example, that would be in their best interest for the municipalities?
Yes. So we are members of there's the Silicon Valley chambers, and we meet regularly. And then there's the California chambers, and we meet regularly. So there are organizations that that band together the different chambers and come up with legislative issues, and that's what the Cal Chamber meeting is all about. The people present the bills that they're proposing to go for or against, and what it means and why, and then the chambers can write letters in support or not participate if that's what they want to do. But so absolutely, yes, there's a hierarchy of contact to the state. But I would also say that our state representatives, our assemblymen, our senators, congresspeople, they're all very involved. They've all taken the time to meet with me personally and make sure that I understand that they, here's my card. It's a direct contact, that they have been very accessible. So I would like to think that if we had an issue in Sunnyvale that we would like to elevate, that we would have a conduit to be able to speak to them directly.
I'm sure we can come up with a few. Thank you.
So thank you, Kat. Oh, thank you, Kat, for that informative presentation. We appreciate your time and wish you all the best luck. It's, retail, getting more retail is hard, but I think you can do it, and we're happy you presented tonight. We next month we will be talking sustainability, so we'll have Christina Raby from city staff and Napor Hiremath from Silicon Valley Clean Energy for our May meeting, and we will also do our election. So thank you very much for coming, and this concludes our April meeting. Yes, you guys.
I've watched Kat Filley and Commissioner Filley in so many different avenues and how talented she is, that I was so happy when she became the chamber executive director. So is it's CEO, chamber CEO. So she's just so driven and so talented. So thank you, Kat. Oh, chamber CEO.
You're also a member of leadership, or graduate of Leadership Sunnyvale.
As with many in the room. So thank you very much. And that concludes our April meeting. So have a good night. Thank you.